Good morning and welcome to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss and honored to be your host this morning. June is LGBTQ Pride Month. Usually we're used to this kind of a conversation about LGBTQ life in a public arena within the political spectrum, but one of the stories that we don't talk about much is LGBTQ life in the faith community. And so I'd like to invite you into a conversation with Maxine Epstein, who is the Director of Institutional Advancement at the Jewish Community High School of the Bay here in San Francisco, and Rabbi Reuben Zellman, who is the Director of Music at Congregation Beth in Berkeley. Welcome, Rabbi Zellman and Maxine.
Thanks for having us.
So jumping into this conversation, it's a little different kind of a conversation that we usually have, but LGBTQ life in a faith community, in the Jewish community. Let's just start out and ask each of you, what has your experience been in the Jewish community itself? Maxine.
Wow, well, I'm going to date myself, but, you know, I'm twice blessed. So being a lesbian and being Jewish, it was very difficult because I didn't come out till graduate school because I didn't think being queer had anything to being Jewish. So until I had no role models, I had no one to model myself after, and I didn't think I could be Jewish and be queer until I met somebody in graduate school at the same seminary that I attended as a communal professional studying nonprofit management, and my first woman lover was there at this at HUC, at Hebrew Union College, and USC, and I thought, oh my God, the heavens opened. I go, you mean, talk about intersectionality. Here were two prominent parts of myself that became integrated.
And Rabbi Zellman.
You know, it's a very similar and very different story for me. The being transgender, the trans community is, one might say in broad strokes, running similar experiences perhaps 30 or 40 years after gay and lesbian people. So the kinds of stories that you're telling are the kinds of stories that trans people now are experiencing right in this moment. So I get calls all the time, just simply because I'm a transgender rabbi. I get calls from all over the world. I get emails, I get postcards. People still send postcards, apparently, of people who are having the very experience that you described, who are, say, growing up in their synagogue. They think they're the only trans Jewish person in the world. They think they're the only Jew who has ever experienced this, and they're reaching out to talk to somebody. Or they're perhaps really struggling because they perhaps believe what many people have believed, which is that Jewish life has no place for people who are gender nonconforming or gender variant, which, thank God, is no longer true, but is still true too much of the time.
And, you know, between the two of you, if we can sort of say there's a generational difference, all kinds of, let's say, liberation struggles change language by experience and by ways in which we all integrate into the wider community. So one of those words in LGBTQ is the Q, queer. So for a certain generation of folks, that word was a word that was degrading, and has over the years been reclaimed by the LGBTQ community as a word that's affirming. And I'm wondering, sort of between the two of you, if you can comment on that transition, because in some ways you embody that language shift.
Well, I've always reclaimed the dyke in being lesbian and have always been much more comfortable with that word. Because it meant everything I thought I was, which was funny and smart and powerful and empowered, simply to be who I was. So I'm comfortable and would love it if it were DGBTQ as opposed to L, but that's just me.
You know, I was admitted to rabbinical school about 14 years ago, and stepped right on the issue that you just brought up, because there were all these reporters and things calling me, which was very surprising for a number of reasons. And I identified as queer because I was 24 and everybody was starting to use queer, even though we had all grown up with it as a schoolyard insult. That was the horrible word that was hurled at us. But it was right at that time when we began to try to say, we actually need a different word. I think the feeling amongst my generation is we really need a different word, because gay means a certain thing, and lesbian is a certain thing, and transgender is a certain thing, and bisexual, but none of them are the same as what queer now means, which is a much more expansive kind of identity that is not just about personal affectional nature necessarily, but also about a certain political alliance, about a certain orientation on fluidity and potential. And so queer means, to me, a very different thing, and it doesn't mean what they used to call us on the school bus.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zellman. Maxine, we're going to take a quick break and return to this wonderful conversation in honor of June as LGBTQ Pride Month. Please join us in just a moment back here on Mosaic.